Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And I am very excited today that we're going to be discussing an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and that is near, not infrared, near infrared sauna detoxification, because I am of the belief, as are many other experts in detoxification, that is an essential, integral component of that. But not only for detox, but so many other biological benefits. And today we are joined by Brian Richards, who is also equally passionate about this modality and doesn't really have any formal health training, but has provided a resource that I think many could be benefit from. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Brian.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mercola.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so excited you're here. We got so much great stuff to talk about. And I guess it might be best to differentiate the difference of types of infrared saunas. And the vast majority of infrared saunas are far infrared, which I still think is a useful challenge. Unfortunately, there's some downsides. So why don't you elaborate on those?
Well, most people understand what they see as an infrared sauna is indeed a far infrared sauna. So far infrared, near infrared, the differences of wavelength. Near infrared is more high energy. It's closer to red, so we call it near infrared. That's what an incandescent sauna is. But that's not what the typical infrared sauna is. The typical infrared sauna is far infrared, which are the very low energy infrared wavelengths. They start out at 3,000 nanometers and up from there. So there's no photobiomodulation from these wavelengths. They're only heating the body. It's a very small portion of the sunlight's spectrum. Actually, only a few percent of the solar radiation is far infrared. The biggest portion of infrared in the sunlight spectrum that reaches the Earth is near infrared. And there's so much more going on with near infrared. So
what's the percentage of near infrared? You mentioned that far infrared is a few percent.
I can bring that up in a second. I think with sunlight, it's about 30%.
Wow,
40%.
I did not know that. Yeah, when I first met Brian at Bulletproof in 2017, I didn't believe in what he was doing and really challenged him for a half hour, just dialogue back and forth. And that's actually, I think it was about that time, wasn't it? Remember that?
Yeah, you came up and you were very skeptical.
I wasn't arrogant. At least I tried not to be. I just was seeking to understand what your position was because I knew you were good at it. And you really enlightened me because I was confused about some basic concepts. And I suspect many people watching this are too. So you now confirm that 30% of the spectrum is near infrared, the sun spectrum.
40, it's about 40%. These are rough figures, but about 40% of sunlight is near infrared. So the majority of the sunlight's emission is near infrared.
Well, not majority would be over 50, but a significant percentage.
The biggest portion, if we're looking at visible light versus far, near, mid, and comparing all of it. So a huge part of our evolutionary context is getting so much of our light as a near infrared wavelength every day.
Yes, and then let me just take a slight tangent before we go back to the differences again. And the traditionally being exposed to sunlight is thought to be almost universally due to the benefit of ultraviolet B radiation stimulating production of vitamin D. But what almost everyone leaves out is the near infrared and its impact on photobiomodulation. So please expand on that.
Yeah, photobiomodulation is simply light activating biological system. So you have to have a light receptor protein, which we call a chromophore in the body, to receive the light and have it activate some biological process. The most well-known form of photobiomodulation is in the mitochondria system. The mitochondria has the light receptor protein, the cytochrome oxidase. So it's one of the main cellular respiration, the main mitochondrial proteins. It turns out it receives light. It has absorption bands only for near infrared light, and visible red light as well. So this very narrow bandwidth of the sunlight is not just heating our body or in terms of UV promoting some kind of vitamin D production. It's in fact activating an entirely different healing system in the body. And since we have mitochondria in every cell of our body besides red blood cells, it's a core restorative healing system. And there's just so many benefits to it. And again, something that we had every day, naked under the sunlight. And
Absolutely. At least for
ancestral.
those who live closer to the tropics or subtropics.
Yeah,
And then those in the
those
winter
don't have
too,
to
up
wear
north.
clothing ever. That's
Yeah,
also, I don't know where
but
that is anymore.
all right. So thanks for expanding on it. And actually, mitochondrial function and the electron transport chain specific has been one of my recent passions, and really how to improve and upregulate its function so that you can decrease electron leakage and reactive oxygen species and oxidative stresses. So believe me, I'm deep in the molecular biological literature, and it's very, very rare to ever find any study that addresses the near infrared component to mitochondrial function. I mean, you almost got to go to the photobiomodulation literature, which used to be previously called LLT, low light laser therapy, but now it's PBM is the more accepted term. So, can you summarize other than what you just said, or is that pretty much your understanding of it?
Well, yeah, that's essentially this near infrared. It activates the mitochondrial healing systems in the cells, but it does a lot more than that too. If we're comparing it near infrared to far infrared, one of the big differences has to do with penetration into biological tissue. We have this concept of water absorption. Water absorbs different wavelengths to different degrees. And the water absorption spectrum actually starts at about 980 nanometers, the first overtone of water, it's called. So right when we get in the middle of near infrared, it's only then that water begins absorbing wavelengths of light. But it's a continuum. So once you get out of near infrared, once you get to about 14 or 1500 nanometers, the water is almost entirely absorbing all of the wavelengths. So once you get out to mid infrared, and certainly when you get to far infrared wavelengths, they're 100% absorbed by water. So many people don't are maybe not aware of this, but far infrared wavelengths, for that reason, do not penetrate biological tissue very deeply at all. So a far infrared sauna using far infrared wavelengths is essentially surface heating you and heating you in a conductive fashion. The near infrared wavelengths, because they're at the beginning of water's absorption spectrum, they penetrate, they've been shown to penetrate up to 100 millimeters, but, on average, at least several inches into the body. So with near infrared wavelengths, we get radiant heat. We get penetrating heat, and this is a much more efficient way to heat biological tissue. So that's another key difference that near infrared has that, from far infrared.
Thank you for explaining that, because that is a massive source of confusion. And actually, I would even speculate, but contend fraud, because many of the far infrared saunas promote their sauna as doing exactly what you said, that it's not conductive, it's heating the body at deep tissues. But because of the explanation you just provided, far infrared's only going a few millimeters into the body. It's very superficial. Now, it has the potential to go in if water wasn't there, but we've got water, so it's not going deep. Whereas
yeah, and this you can just Google water absorption spectrum, and you can see this for yourself on most scientific websites. It's a very well-known old concept of water absorption, and it's interesting that a man-made's oldest light-emitting technology is the incandescent bulb, and that's what farmers in agriculture have used to heat livestock for almost 100 years now. They've known for many, many decades that is a more efficient way of heating the body. And it's because it's primarily near infrared with the incandescent bulb, because it's what's called incandescence, which we throw that term around a lot, but it's actually really simple. When you heat up a material in nature hot enough, it emits light naturally. So when an iron rod glows red, that's incandescence. The fireplace, the candle, the incandescent bulb, and also the sun. These are in physics, it's called black body radiation, but we understand it also as incandescence. It's natural light. Natural light is literally incandescent light.
Yes.
So it's been around with us, ancestrally forever. And even in terms of lighting technology, electrical technology, we've had the incandescent bulb the longest. And it is the most efficient way to heat tissue because it is substantially near infrared.
Yeah. So that's a massive difference. And that, if it wasn't for that fact alone, that would be a strong encouragement to heat your body more effectively to help facilitate detoxification, which is one of the primary benefits, but there's many more that I'm sure we're going to touch on. But the oldest form, I mean, incandescent bulbs have been around 100 years, actually more than 100 years, but not much. But what precedes that by many millennia would be fire, which is pretty similar spectrum to the incandescent bulbs.
Yeah, essentially the peak of the spectrum is determined by the temperature of the source. So the sun is about 5,500 Kelvin, so its peak is in the visible light band. The incandescent bulb is, between 2,400 to 2,800 Kelvin, so about half the temperature of the sun. So its peak is actually in the near infrared. So it's a little bit shorter, and the peak is shifted a little bit to lower energy to near infrared. But essentially, it's the same form of light. The fireplace and the candle will just be a lower peak and shifted even more into the infrared spectrum, but still the same natural curve of light.
I think it's about 1,200 Kelvin, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So, but the key thing is that it's an analog spectrum. It's not. It's the complete frequency between a certain ranges, and of course, far infrared has the higher ranges, and the near infrared is. Where does the near infrared go off on the high end? Is it mid infrared?
It's 600 to 700 is visible red light. 700 to 1,500 is roughly near infrared, and then we get into mid infrared, 1,500 to 3,000 nanometers.
Okay,
and then once we beyond that, it's far infrared. So. Yeah, it is analog light. And so there's a lot of confusion about this too. Well, what is full spectrum? And this is full spectrum, and that's full spectrum. And there are so-called fluorescent bulbs that are full spectrum bulbs. They're really not full spectrum. I have an old spectral chart that I used a long time ago. It looks like this. The green spectrum here, if you can see in the back, these spikes, that's a fluorescent bulb. And an LED bulb, a typical home LED is in the blue. And the sun is kind of in yellow in the background, and then the incandescent bulb is in pink. But what you see here is analog light is full spectrum. So it's all of these wavelengths in a natural power curve. That's what full spectrum means. So you get all the wavelengths in this relative proportion that's determined by this big bell curve shape with a long tail in infrared. If you're talking about your typical LED bulb, or your typical fluorescent bulb, it's this spiky digital spectrum. It's very stepwise. It's unnatural looking. It's not a smooth curve of all the wavelengths. It's a few wavelengths and a very high power output. So it's not light that we're used to get. And that's the difference between full spectrum and monochromatic light. And only incandescent light sources really are truly full spectrum. Everything else, LEDs and fluorescents, just give the appearance of full spectrum. So in an LED, they'll add a different. It's typically blue, a lot of blue light, and they add a different phosphorescing compound to give it a yellow peak. So to the human eye, it looks like white light or yellow light or kind of that tungsten glow. But it's in terms of the spectral output, it's not natural. It's hiding an unnatural spectrum, unnatural correlation of wavelengths that we're not used to.
Yeah. So those clearly, we're both huge advocates of analog full spectrum lighting, true full spectrum lighting. And aside from the wavelength difference you just described, the other pernicious component of that is the dirty electricity introduction, which makes fluorescent the worst type of lighting you could possibly have. And most people watching this are probably in an office or work in an office that almost invariably has full spectrum, fluorescent lighting in it. And, it's amazing how many people refuse to incorporate it. But all you've got to do, especially if you got windows, is turn off the lights. Turn off the lights, because not only are you going to get bad frequencies, you're going to get energy outputs, these high voltage transients that go into the electricity and go straight into your body directly, even from the light itself, not in addition to the one that introduces into the wiring. So
yeah, that's a really scary concept, actually, that the electrical line can conduct the microwave cell phone signal and carry it to the fluorescent bulb, and it can actually radiate out of the bulb and hit you with electric field stress.
Well, it's not the radio frequency microwaves. It's actually lower frequencies, like 2 to 100 kilohertz typically, and fluorescents are typically about 62 kilohertz where it introduces. It's an artifact of the way that the light is produced, and it's a very pernicious biological frequency, and that's something you should have never been exposed to, and it increases your body voltage, and that's not healthy. Believe me, it's not healthy.
Yeah. You are correct, Dr. Mercola. Also, there's the issue of flicker.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much of an issue that is, but it is there. Yes. Anytime you have a digital light source, that's going to happen. You can explain that now that you mention it.
Well, your fluorescent bulbs flicker 400 to 600 times a second, and LED bulbs flicker typically at 120 hertz, so 120 times a second. Fluorescents shut off to about 30% each time the phase is, in the flickering of the bulb. So it's not as a dramatic a flicker as an LED. An LED completely shuts off from 0 to 100% every time the phase changes in the alternating current. So the degree of flicker from an LED is greater and more stressful, even though the flicker rate of a fluorescent bulb is higher. But in both scenarios, it's light that's pulsing us like this, and is a nervous system stressor. It jacks you up. It's an excitatory stimulus. And there are, if you search on the PubMed, there are some studies that are showing that it's been associated, with headaches and dizziness and migraines and other, undesirable psychological effects on the body, this flicker stress. And you compound that with it being all blue light as well, a natural spectrum, as we discussed, it becomes, and it's something that we sit under all day long in the office, and it becomes a real problem, something that actually does have a detrimental effect on our health.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good summary of the downsides. The upsides, and there are some significant ones, and such that the short-sighted governmental authorities in the world, most of them, have outlawed these incandescent bulbs, because when these other bulbs, the fluorescents and LEDs, pulse on and off as you described, when they're off, they're not using energy. So they're far more energy efficient than an incandescent bulb. Some ratios are 20 to 1. So it'll cost you, for every dollar you're spending on a digital bulb, you may be spending 20 on an incandescent bulb. And the conventional thought is that it's all that heat is wasted energy, but in fact, it's not. It's a very useful source, and you could actually harness that energy to do very powerful and important biological strategies. So why don't you take off on that and expand on it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the incandescent bulb is condemned as being energy inefficient, but it's a wonderful way to heat the room, and farmers have been using it forever. Here's our typical incandescent bulb we use for incandescent sauna therapy. So we use a 250 watt red filtered incandescent bulb, and all of the wavelengths emitted that the energy efficient folks call non-efficient and wasteful are the healing wavelengths. Those are so we've taken, when we've gone to when we've gone to LEDs and fluorescents, we've removed the healing component for the sake of energy efficiency, but with very detrimental consequences to our health. When if we're going to sit inside, we're going to use light that's produced by electricity for convenience. If we use an incandescent bulb, we get so many benefits with it on the healing side of things and the heating side of things that are actually there. And we know from sauna therapy, we know all the benefits we have from heating the body. It's not just a detox; it's the vasodilation and the blood circulation and the structuring of water aspects. There's so many aspects that are beneficial to us. We remove almost all of those in our attempt to become 1,000% energy efficient. And besides the disadvantages we've already discussed with LEDs and fluorescents, we have other ones too. Fluorescent bulbs are actually mercury vapor bulbs. So when you break those in your office, it creates a very hazardous waste that basically mercury vapor that sticks to everything. It's very toxic stuff. And even if it doesn't break in your office, what happens when you're done with that fluorescent bulb? It's breaking outside in the trash can. It's breaking in the earth. it's what I would consider to be very damaging to our environment, to our earth. And that makes it the energy, I think the energy efficient argument becomes weaker when we talk about the damage to the environment. The incandescent bulb is just glass. There's no toxic waste involved. And the same thing with these new LED bulbs for home lighting. They're all little tiny pieces of plastic. They're generating a lot of plastic that is not good for our environment. And beyond that, just what's more important, saving this incremental amount of electricity or our health, really? How can we heal our bodies every day? We were doing that with incandescent bulb for 80 years.
Yeah. I have done a previous interview with Dr. Alexander Wunsch, who is a native-born German and is usually based in Germany. I'm sure you're familiar with his work, but unfortunately has a very, very thick German accent and nowhere near as articulate as you. So we discussed this previously, primarily from the perspective of using incandescent lights as a therapy, not as a therapy, but as a lighting source. Mm-hmm. So as which we focused on now, but aside from that, and I think there's some good arguments, and let's finish this off before we move on to the therapeutic benefits. One is that they are pretty much illegal and to sell, except for some modifications, and you might know this better than me, but that's for most of US and Europe, and you have to buy specialty bulbs, which have an exemption and cost like 5 times as much. Instead of 25 cents a bulb, it's like a few dollars. So you can go to eBay and still find some of the old ones. The last time I bought about 500 of them because I want to have stock of these things. Just the regular 60-watt bulbs that you can put in your room, in your kitchen, your bedroom, your bathroom. You don't have to put them in every outlet and fixture in your house because some of them you hardly ever use, but the ones you use every day are the ones you need to use. And you've got the 250 watt, which is a different version. Yeah, now you're getting into healing therapy.
Correct. You want the 250 watt in incandescent sauna therapy because you want a lot of irradiance. You want a lot of these big portion of the healing wavelengths of near infrared. But that's kind of a misnomer, though, that it's become illegal. It's just perceived. It's perceived as being banned.
Well, clarify for us.
So what actually happened is they just changed the energy efficiency requirements, and so by de facto. So it banned all of the bulbs. So you can't get the 150 watts. You can't get the ones that switch from 50 to 100 and 150 that you could dial. You could change the level of light that was so convenient. You can't get the big wattage work bulbs anymore. But there was an exemption for specialty bulbs, oven bulbs, the heat lamp bulb that we use in incandescent saunas. And that regulated everything kind of downwards in terms of what's the maximum bulb you can buy. So you can go to Home Depot and the Walmart and the other stores, and you'll still find it, but it won't be 60 watt. It'll be 52 watt, and it'll be 28 watt. And so the maximum wattage you see out there is just under 60 watt now in terms of a home incandescent bulb, and that's in the USA. I'm referring to. That was a law that was passed, only a few years ago. So they're still available. They're just there's the maximum wattages have been dramatically reduced, but all of the specialty bulbs are exempt. And if we go to Europe and Australia, where there's a more aggressive ban, basically a complete ban on incandescence, there's still actually an exemption for specialty bulbs.
Okay.
So you can still get incandescent 250 watt sauna therapy bulbs in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in places that it seems like they're not available at all.
Okay. Thank you for expanding on that. And now let's shift to the therapeutic use, which is one of your specialties, and using these near infrared bulbs, which we've discussed, for healing. And but before we delve into that, I just want to continue to clear up the confusion and the distinction between far infrared and near infrared, because many of the far infrared saunas are advertised as full spectrum, no EMF. And I'd like you to address that, because that has not been my experience. In fact, prior to using your sauna, I was using a sauna that was advertised as that, and did the due diligence and found out that in fact it was just far infrared. There was maybe a touch of near, but no near infrared, or virtually none. And they were claiming it was, and they said it was no EMF. Well, yeah, there was no magnetic fields, but it was loaded, absolutely loaded with electrical fields, which are very, very difficult to measure and a source of massive confusion, even within the building biology community.
Yeah, so So it is a misnomer. Most infrareds out there, almost all of them actually, are far infrared. So they're entirely far. They're relying on far infrared wavelengths of 3,000 nanometers and greater, the very low energy infrared, for the heat.
Mhm.
Now, you've got to be careful here because there are so-called full spectrum infrared saunas now, where they have the far infrared emitters for heat, but they've added in near infrared emitters in one of two ways. One way is to use LEDs. And you can make LED light emitting diodes now that emit only one monochromatic near infrared wavelength. So they'll add a few of those in to be able to claim that there's near infrared and therefore it's full spectrum, when it's not. It's really two technologies that they're trying to bring together and create a composite full spectrum, but it still doesn't have the same natural shape as an incandescent bulb, as the sunlight. It's in fact, inferior in terms of the shape of the spectrum, and it's not covering all the wavelengths in the same natural power curve. There's also some saunas that use low irradiance near infrared emitters. They're basically heating elements that are hotter than the far infrareds, and they do emit a small amount of near infrared, but it's at a very low power level, what we call in light therapy irradiance. Mm-hmm. So they're there, but
please expand on that term. You've mentioned it a few times, and that is the best, most precise scientific term, but virtually everyone watching this doesn't know what that means, and it's a powerful term. So please expand on it.
So irradiance is literally the power density. So power, it's measured in watts per meter squared is the standard units. So watts is power. That's how much power we get from electricity. A light bulb is typically, an incandescent bulb is 250 watts, so we know it's high powered. So watts per meter squared are how much power is being received across an area in space. Mm-hmm. And that's what power density is. So it's the power that's received across a surface area in space. So when we look at light sources in terms of like how much light therapy are we getting, how much dose are we getting? Mm-hmm. We measure it by measuring irradiance, because if we know the irradiance and we know how far away we are from it, then we know exactly how many joules we get, how much energy we get dosed with per second. Uh-huh. And so if we sit a certain amount of time at a certain distance from a light source of known irradiance, and we can figure out exactly how much energy we receive per unit time. So this in the scientific world, they use this term irradiance, but it's basically power over an area, and it varies widely with different light technologies, of course. And
there's some inexpensive meters that can objectively measure this. It's a light meter, essentially, energy light meter.
Yeah, they're called irradiance meters, and a solar panel. People who install solar panels will use them to measure the irradiance, of the sun and the radiance received by the solar panel. It's a very affordable meter, actually, you can buy. The typical consumer meters measure between 400 and 1100 nanometers. So they're measuring basically visible light and interestingly, the photobiomodulation section of near infrared. So you can use a consumer irradiance meter and basically figure out how much photobiomodulation, how much light therapy am I getting from said light source.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful description. And I think with that, people can now begin to understand that even in a near infrared composite sauna that you described, they've got a few token LED near infrareds. Yes, theoretically or legally, you can say that it's more of a full spectrum, but the reality is, if you can look at the irradiance, it's clinically insignificant. It's not going to do diddly squat.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, you look at, there is one study I could direct you to where in even incredibly low levels of irradiance do have some biological response to them. But in the light therapy world, in therapeutic kind of medical light therapy, there's a certain minimum irradiance, a certain power level you need to get clinical results. So it's actually, between 10 and 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. It's just, that's just, you can look this up. It's widely available online, but you need to reach that minimum level. And so you can figure out really easily on your own with this consumer radiance meter, am I getting a therapeutic dose? Am I getting a therapeutic level? And with these far infrared saunas that use LEDs, there's not enough LEDs and you're not close enough to it, and it's not exposing your entire body to it. So it's really inferior. It's a really inferior way to get LLT, to get near infrared wavelengths at enough power level to be significant, to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just to finish that off, to the 10 to 100 joules per centimeter squared, it's the range. Probably want it closer to the 10 to 20. But if you go over 100, then you actually can be counterproductive. You can get too much energy, and it's certainly that in photobiomodulation that can actually have different effects, actually shut down receptors. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to make, Dr. Mercola. It really, we need to be careful. What are we doing here? Even with sauna, even with light therapy, we don't want an unlimited amount of these things. Just like you can't be in the sun for a limited amount. You don't want to be in the sauna for 8 hours. Right. With the sauna, you want to heat shock the body, raise cell temperature a few degrees, and you get all these detox and other cellular responses due to the heat shock. The same thing with the light. You want to get a certain kind of natural level of irradiance, 20, 30, 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared for a certain amount of time. And that activates the healing systems in the cells in the body, and then let the body do its work. If you look at the LLT literature, the reason it's called low-level light therapy is because it's also referred to as low-level laser therapy. The original light therapy studies were done with lasers, which are high-powered sources where the irradiance is incredibly high. And what was found was that just like getting too much UV or getting too much of anything, it's too much energy for the system and you can damage it. And so you see that if you see studies where near-infrared wavelengths have been shown to be damaging to the cells, and you have to look at the irradiance levels that they're using the studies, and you see that they're incredibly high. Just like if you get too much near-infrared or too much infrared, you can burn yourself. It's all about getting a natural level of dosage, and it's the same thing with like the ROS species, the reactive oxygen species. That's kind of, Dr. Hamblin has an article where he called friend or foe, where he, is this good thing for us? Is it a bad thing for us? How, if it's associated with so many problems because it's a free radical, if it's activated and produced by blue light exposure or in oxidative stress scenarios, why is it with mitochondrial stimulation, when we do LLT, it's a good thing? And that's because we're doing it in this context of mitochondrial stimulation, where we're producing the nitric oxide release and increase ATP production. And they all work together in concert to promote healing effects and DNA repair effects and regenerative effects. And it's all because it's at a measured dose that's, natural and reasonable and not too high.
Well, let's just finish up on the LEDs and then transfer into the phototherapy for sauna detoxification. It's important to understand that I am unaware of any full spectrum LED sauna or light therapy, and it's theoretically possible, but you'd have one LED only goes over a very short wavelength, about 10 nanometers. So you'd have to have hundreds of different frequencies all over the place, and it just wouldn't be practical. So I don't know that one exists even. So it's not full spectrum. It's not analog LED. So the only thing would be an incandescent, which is what you're focused on, and I couldn't agree more. I was pretty unaware of this until I connected with you at Bulletproof, and then you really, I didn't realize the spectrum, that it was mostly mid-infrared. I thought it was higher and or lower and was confused. So it was really helpful. In my personal experience in using a near-infrared therapy, which is what I use nearly every day that I'm home, is it heats you up really dark. You don't need, in fact, I do not preheat my sauna, because it's not a conductive. It goes right into your body. As soon as you turn that light on, you start heating up. You won't start to sweat for a few minutes, but you definitely can feel it, which does not happen in a far infrared sauna. You have to heat that thing up for 10, 15 minutes. So why don't you talk about phototherapy for light and maybe expand a bit on, or elaborate on what I just mentioned?
Well, it's something that I discovered myself. I came to incandescent sauna for my own health problems. I had insomnia, some mind racing. I had what I now know is adrenal fatigue. I didn't know what that was. I just didn't feel good, and I was negative, low energy, and I had weird acne issues on my torso. But through my Google, my Google research, as people do nowadays, to get to get information and take action, I came across this concept. It dates back to Dr. Kellogg, actually, of the early 20th century. And then I subsequently learned, I watched Alexander Wunsch's videos, as you mentioned, and many other folks. And incandescent light therapy dates back 100 years, a long time ago. They were using it to heal lupus vulgaris and all these other things. So a long time ago, before we had this word photobiomodulation, before we could look at the microscopic level and see the mitochondria, we had an understanding that this light was healing. So I found an old doctor's manual and it instructed on how to build your own incandescent lamp sauna. I built my own and had this amazing healing experience. Completely resolved all of my problems. It meant insomnia immediately, and over a period of months, everything else, and it really blew me away. That's what got me into all of this, into incandescent sauna stuff. But since then, I've definitely tried other saunas. My parents, for example, had a farm-fed sauna growing up in our house. I never really used it very much, but it's striking how poorly the farm-fed sauna heats you. You sit in there for like 20 minutes and you're waiting, and you're looking at your watch, you're waiting. And, in my sauna, in an incandescent sauna, it's immediate. You start sweating and you can feel the heat. The heat is very visceral and vital, and it's getting in there. But you know what? It feels good. And it feels good because it's mitochondrial stimulation and it's natural full spectrum light in the natural shape and form of light as we're designed to get it. So it's a feel good heat and a great sweat. And we know now too that it comes with all of these benefits of photobiomodulation. And there's other kind of, how would you describe it, kind of a synergistic benefits that you can't just attribute to the detox of the heat and the mitochondrial stimulation of the light. There's this idea of structured water, interfacial water versus unstructured water, or lazy water. Wunsch talks a lot about how a water nutrient delivery is improved when near-infrared light hits water. And we need that for our eye health, and we need that for every nutrient delivery in every cell of our body and in between the cells. But you also have other effects too. Structured water is a really interesting thing. It's all the wavelengths of sunlight structure water. Some structure water better than others, like far infrared wavelengths at 3,000 nanometers do structure a little more effectively than near infrared. But all wavelengths, blue, visible light, near infrared, mid infrared, far infrared, they all structure water. If you look at the mitochondria, it's the inside of the mitochondria has been shown to be entirely structured water. And so there's something going on there where it has like a biological significance and importance that we absolutely need. And the more we study at the microscopic level, we see that structured water can be its own chromophore. So it can have non-thermal effects where it is a vehicle to activate and improve and optimize biological systems, water in this special structured state. And so just another greater argument that we need all of the wavelengths in the natural form, because they're all structuring the water, and some are heating and some are light therapy activating. And this is all supposed to work in concert. The light therapy, I think, for example, makes the detoxification less stressful, less energetic. So for folks who have extreme illness, who are weak, who are just dealing with serious problems, they can't use a regular sauna, even though they need to detox. They desperately need to. A near-infrared, what we commonly call a near-infrared sauna is an incandescent sauna. It gives them access to this desperately needed detoxification therapy. And that includes folks who have, neuropathic issues. And this is just my experience, my humble experience, dealing with this for 5 or 6 years, is folks with severe neuropathies and weakness and heat sensitivity, they can use an incandescent sauna. And they can't use a regular sauna. They just can't tolerate it. And Hope, if you know Hope for Cancer, a world famous cancer treatment clinic based in Mexico, they only use incandescent lamp saunas as their detoxification modality, because they know that this is what the weaker folks, this is the only thing they can handle. So it's another really important aspect here, that it's not just a better way to do this. It's a more accessible way to do this, particularly for folks, on the weaker side of things.
And we'll talk about that in a bit. And part of the reason they can't tolerate it is the electrical frequencies, which you've addressed. And it's one of the things I really appreciate about you, even though you don't have any formal scientific training. It doesn't matter. You're just a smart guy. You know how to use the internet, and you can think. Your brain works well, and you've accomplished quite a bit. It's very impressive. So, thank you for mentioning the structured water component. In fact, I drink structured water, but I don't think it's necessary. I really don't. I think it's far more important to structure the water in your body through
Yes.
modalities like natural sunlight or far infrared, or not far, the near infrared bulbs.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the reasons why I do it every day. Now, theoretically, I don't need to use one in the summer. I could probably generate the same response just walking on the beach, and just almost sweat as much depending on this time of year. But I
Mhm.
still use a sauna
Yeah, and you also
every
live in
day.
Florida. I mean,
Yeah, I know, but hardly anyone lives in the subtropics. So, and even in the winter, you can't do that. So it's a very valuable tool. But I'm wondering, you had said you built your first near infrared sauna. It's not the one you're using today because that's what you focused on. And I'm wondering if you could comment on Dr. Lawrence Wilson. I used to call him Larry Wilson, but it's if you have to type in the formal Lawrence to find it in Amazon, because he has instructions. I think it's called sauna therapy. You can build a near infrared sauna for a few $100s. So is that what you did? And maybe,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah. So why don't you comment on that, and then we'll go into what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I failed to mention that in the beginning. That is the doctor's book that I stumbled upon actually
Okay.
online. Dr. Lawrence Wilson, Sauna Therapy for Detoxification and
Mm-hmm.
Healing. He's, back in the day, he was the only guy even talking about this, and he has, and he was way out there. He was really way ahead of his time. He's still alive today,
Yeah, I know.
still alive and well, and yeah, I'm endlessly thankful for his work in exploring this aspect and basically bringing it back. It was used in Dr. Kellogg's
Mm-hmm.
sanitariums and his spas, and it was used by this guy, Dr. Dinshaw, a long time
Mm-hmm.
ago. This Indian physician for light therapy. The incandescent bulb was in the 20s and the 10s and the 30s, but somehow it died out, as so many natural modalities died out. In the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And it's only recently that's come back. Although in many chiropractic schools they used to teach single lamp therapy, and that's what I have here. This is a single 250-watt bulb that we're using outside of the sauna. We're shining it close on the body for targeted, localized relief of localized issues. That was a part of of many chiropractic school, in the educational curriculum up until the 60s or 70s, and then it just kind of went away. But Dr. Wilson definitely brought this back with his book and popularized it again. So I built mine based on his plans, and it was a very bricolage product. He, for example, recommends using PVC plumbing pipe to
Mm-hmm.
construct the framework of a sauna, and just use painter's cloths from the hardware store, and use hardware cloth, or farmers call chicken wire for the bulbs. And so that's what I made. And so it did work. It worked incredibly well for me, but it does have some serious disadvantages.
Okay. And you, from experience, what are the disadvantages?
So one, we want it to be hypoallergenic. Number one, we want natural materials. We don't want a bunch of off-gassing of
Mm-hmm.
plastic. So you need to address that. That's a real big issue. Two, these bulbs are hot.
Mm-hmm.
We need to protect ourselves from the bulbs, and just a hardware cloth or some flexible wires is not sufficient.
Because you can burn yourself.
You never want to touch the surface of the incandescent bulb. You can't burn yourself. So you need hard, a professional protection from that. Something that's not negligently designed. So those are some basic product design issues that I've addressed in my saunas. But more interestingly and harder to address are the electric field and magnetic field mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
So EMFs, they stress us out. They're nervous system stressors.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to address both of them. And they're actually addressed in totally different ways. And this is a big misnomer that you touched on earlier, Dr. Mercola. The so-called far infrared saunas that are described as low EMF. When they say they're low EMF, they're only talking about magnetic field. So they're only talking about one half of the picture here. Both magnetic field and electric field are nervous system stressors. We don't want either of them from our electrical device. They interact with our bodies in different ways, certainly, but they also, are are different in nature. So magnetic fields are hard to mitigate. They're really hard to shield. To shield them in like big physical permanent structures, you use mu metals and other special metallic plating to make the magnetic field go around the volume, because you can't really shield it. You just kind of divert it.
Deflect it, yeah.
But what else you can do is to use two magnetic fields to cancel each other out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been my solution. It's in the saunas that we're making here, is to take one magnetic field and use a different magnetic field and cancel it out, so that the effective magnetic field from the device that you measure with a Gauss meter doesn't extend, farther than a few inches from the electrical body of the device. And that's the case, and we can empirically show that. So that's been a solution that took a while to figure out, but that only addresses the magnetic field. So again, what about electric field? All of these far infrared saunas, like I believe the sauna you used to have, the
absolutely,
the far infrared sort of
a tent
bag style sauna that your head sticks out of. Also the half saunas that I've seen that are kind of a half cabinet, to the full blown cabinet far infrared saunas. They all have extremely high electric fields. So electric field is measured in volts per meter, whereas magnetic field is measured in milligauss. So
or Tesla, nanotesla.
Or nanotesla, correct. But we're using two totally different meters to measure this. So you can measure all day long with a Gauss meter to measure magnetic field, show that it's low, and yet the electric field is very high, and you're still getting that nervous system stress. And you need to be disclosing and showing both sides of the EMF and show that they're both not present. So these far infrared saunas that you find, every single one that I've ever measured, not just my parents, but others out there, if you contact far infrared sauna manufacturers and ask them about EMFs, they'll say, yeah, we're really low. It's only a few milligauss. And then you say, well, what about electric field? And they don't even have that measurement. But if you measure these, they're in many volts, hundreds to thousands of millivolts. And I've even measured ones that are.
My sauna was putting 65,000 millivolts in me.
Wow. So 65 volts. That's very high.
65 volts. I mean, that's crazy.
And that's in a healing space. That's a space that you're supposed to do. So it's something that's not that the manufacturers aren't aware of, and the public's not necessarily so aware of. So it kind of goes under the radar. But here, I've been aware of this for a while, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to address it. And I've basically done so through shielding and grounding principles.
Okay, before we go there, I just want to establish the challenge it is to measure electric field. It's not an easy thing to measure. And some of the meters you mentioned do have it, like the tri-field, which is fairly good screen for magnetic fields, does have the ability to measure electric fields, but it's kind of worthless. It doesn't measure it well. The only way you can do it is you have to reference it to a ground, which in itself is a challenge because of dirty electricity, which is far more complex than we have time for it to address today. But nevertheless, these instruments are hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and some of them thousands of dollars, to measure this accurately, to get a good idea of what your electric field exposure is in your body.
Yes, that's the issue. Is definitely with magnetic field, but also electric field. We don't care so much what's going on around us as we care what is the influence on the body. And so you have to use specialized voltage meters called body voltage meters, where we're measuring the voltage reading of the person's body. And that's what we want to minimize and address and mitigate. So you can use a tri-field meter, which is not grounded, so it's not nearly as sensitive as a more expensive grounded voltage meter or electric field meter. But you're still not getting an accurate picture of what's going on with you. You're measuring the air in front of you or the desk in front of you. When you use a body voltage meter, and there are a few of them. I mean, the one that I use is very sensitive. It has gold componentry. It's one of the most sensitive. It is very expensive as well. But there are some body voltage meters out there that are only a couple $100s or less. And if for folks who are really interested in it, it is a fascinating experience to get your body voltage meter and go around your house and lay in your bed and realize how much voltage you actually have everywhere all around. But yeah, that's it. Once a proper body voltage meter is grounded, because the voltage meter is measuring the difference in electrical potential between where it's at and what you're measuring. And your body influences the voltage rating if it's not grounded. And it gives you an inaccurate measurement. So when you use a proper grounded body voltage meter and you're measuring body voltage instead of just the voltage around the sauna, you find that when you sit inside a far infrared sauna with a body voltage meter, you'll get thousands of volts per meter, or thousands of millivolts, depending on the meter you're using, or very high.
Thousands sometimes.
Or in your case, tens of thousands. Really, it varies. But all of that is way higher than it should be. So let's talk about ancestral context. Our natural body voltage is only a few millivolts or less, even. It's almost zero. And it fluctuates and whatnot, but it's never above 10 millivolts ever ancestrally, pre-1888. We never had this in our life for 1 million years. We never had any of this man-made electric field stress, and we have it now 24 hours a day, from dirty electricity, from our computers and what I'm talking through you with, to even driving around in the car. You have a synthetic magnetic field generated by the wheels. So we have this magnetic field and electric field stress that's with us 24 hours a day, not to mention...
That's from the steel-belted radials rotating, which would generate sense.
Yeah. I mean, and not to mention that probably the most pernicious source of modern electric field stress, and that's cell phone signal. Mm-hmm. It's just such high wattage. It's so much higher. The older generations grew up only with dirty electricity. Mm-hmm. But only in the last 20 years or more have we begun to increase and dramatically the amounts of wattage of microwave signals flying through the air that get us 24 hours a day. I mean, where can you go where you don't get a cell phone signal now?
Well, we had radio frequencies in the 30s and 40s from TVs and radio towers, but they could be pretty high, but they weren't as pervasive as cell phones, for sure.
Yeah, they were just the wattage is just so much greater now. Just it's so much more ubiquitous now. Oh, yes. So it's a real problem. But basically, in the incandescent saunas that I've been making and dealing with for many years, it took many years for me to get to this point in the product development. But I got to a point where it's like, hey, we need to address this electric field issue. Mm-hmm. We can't be sitting in the sauna and be stressing ourselves out with electric field stress. So we basically use grounding and shielding principles to ground out and block out and shield out all the electric fields so they don't get to the user. So they don't increase the body voltage. And so you see that in my sauna, you measure with a body voltage meter, either measuring RF radio frequency or measuring dirty electricity, the low frequency. You'll see that it's almost zero. It's pretty much zero. And that is really unique.
Significant, yes.
Yeah, there's no sauna that on Earth that's ever done that before. So
you should get an award for that, by the way, I think.
Thank you.
It really is quite an achievement. And you're so ahead of the curve of this, and for really appreciating it, because one of the building biologists that uses GeoVital, which is a European or Austrian, and specifically in your case, it was Brian Hoyer, who's one of your consultants and actually consulted with my home too. He went around, and I have to applaud you for this, to all different sauna manufacturers. And every single one that he contacted refused to address this electric field component. You were the only sauna company that wanted to work with him, the only one he contacted. And because it's just part of your personality. You're open. You always want the best. You wanted to do it the best way possible. And you did. Now you created what I think is the ultimate near infrared sauna.
Yeah, it's a thing where if you don't know you're doing something wrong, then you can't address it. But once you get out of the cave and you're aware of a problem, it's not just unethical to not address that. I mean, it's just against my very nature. And that's really what's carried me this far is once I became aware of how to measure body voltage really, really precisely and all the principles involved, I endlessly sought a design solution for it. And the design solutions are actually really tricky, but it's something that does need to be addressed. And as soon as I had the tools and the knowledge and the awareness to do so, I did so immediately. And that's a journey, that we're all on in life. and even in the humble world of consumer products, we're also on that. You know, the consumers, they deserve a better product. They deserve a safer option that's more effective and with less problems and more guarantee. That's been my ultimate goal, is to widen this access to this, because this incandescent therapy, it just works so well.
Yeah. So let's go back to that, because there's the affordability becomes an issue, because this technological innovation you put together is kind of pricey, but it's and it is, in my view, the ultimate. But if you don't have the funds to afford that, you can go all the way down like you started with this, because those near infrared bulbs, and that's the core of your sauna, are these 4 250-watt Philips incandescent bulbs, and you can buy those collectively for under $25 total. That doesn't buy any of the fixtures or the cords or everything to set it up, but probably for a few $100s you can set up something like you did. And I have the sauna, and I'd like your feedback on this. I don't really think you need an enclosure if you're not addressing the electric fields. You could just put it up in your shower. I mean, because it's direct exposure. You think you need to be in a tent. No, this is not a far infrared sauna. This is a near. The heating occurs from the light going into your body, and you don't need a tent for that. So
So really, all you need is the radiant heat works so well.
Yeah,
you are correct, Dr. Mercola. All you really need is
exposure,
air around you to be above body temperature.
Yeah.
Above 100 degrees. So, we manufacture. We handcraft an entire catalog here, including the core of our sauna. These 4 lights. These 4 250-watt lights on a shielded device, and with all the lifetime warranty and the quality that we manufacture, we sell just that as well, because you can use it in a closet. You can use it in a shower.
A shower would probably be the most.
A shower. You can. We have a lot of folks who have far infrared cabinet saunas. Yeah. And they're purchasing just that because
putting that in there.
They have buyer remorse, and they want to upgrade to near infrared and to full spectrum and to be shielded. And so you can put one of ours into a far infrared sauna, very affordably, and not have to deal with any of the EMF stress at all from the product. You just don't ever have to turn it on. You just use the 4 walls and ceiling. Same goes with the shower or other innovative enclosures that people can think of.
Yes, indeed. So that is definitely a strategy.
And even beyond that, for folks who are skeptical of the concept, or the proof's in the pudding, and I follow that as well. I want to see and feel the results. You can start out with 1 bulb. You can start out with what's called this targeted therapy. So single lamp incandescent therapy, and just use that for a localized issue. Folks are using it for everything from headaches to cramps to skin issues to neuropathies in the limbs to just aches and pains from old injuries and stuff. That's something that anybody can start out with and get a feel for this concept, and then understand, well, for the full body and the real detoxification, you do need to sweat passively. And to sweat passively, we need the air around us to be up 100 degrees. Typically, it's nice to have an enclosure to do that for convenience, but depending on the environment, that can be gotten. The sauna room could be the size of a football stadium if it was above 100 degrees, and you would just sit happily in front of your 4 250-watt red filtered incandescent lamps.
Is that because 100 degrees is hotter than body temperature? 98?
Yeah. So we didn't talk too much yet about the detoxification, but that's really what we need, and that's why at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what heat source you use. You could even use a hot tub. You need to raise core temperature. If we're talking about detoxification and the elimination of heavy metals and things like that from the body, it's really that difference between passive and active sweating is really key. And there's,
please expand on that. Elaborate.
There's a big misnomer about this. There's actually a National Geographic article that touches on this, where it's claimed that sweating doesn't detox you. But the example they proffer is someone who's vigorously, actively sweating on a treadmill for 2 hours, and the concentration of toxins in their sweat is very, very low. And that's true because of this idea of sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Okay.
So the autonomic nervous system has 2 states. We learned in high school biology, it's fight or flight, rest and digest. So when we're running on the treadmill, all the cellular and body's energy is going towards locomotion. All the energy is going to the muscles and the lungs and the heart, basically. And there's no cellular reserves or kind of hormonal gearing for detoxification or cellular repair or anything like that. And we see that in studies too. If you look at the studies where they use the L. Ron Hubbard or the Hubbard detoxification modality on the 9/11 rescue workers, and you can just Google those studies as well. When they put them in the sauna for a couple hours a day, and this was a wet sauna, the toxin concentration in their in the tissue samples taken and the blood samples taken and the sweat samples as well over a period of time, they reduced like the toluene and the xylene and these terrible petrochemical levels like 90%. They're massive concentrations of toxins that they were sweating out, but it's because they were doing it passively in the sauna. And that has to do with that parasympathetic gearing of the body. What rest and digest literally means that. It's when you have all this energy that's going into the body with the incandescent sauna, all this near-infrared light, but you're just sitting there. You're not responding to the environment and escaping the bear or the environmental stress. The body's using all this amazing energy from the incandescent light to repair, to heal, to detox, to eliminate, to fix itself.
Yeah,
and so,
but you can do that with a regular near infrared that's not yours. You're still going to get some environmental stress because of the electric and radio frequency field. So even though you're not doing anything actively yourself, you're still getting that stress and activating your sympathetic nervous system. Where you can go into your sauna, you're like parasympathetic neutral. You're just activating parasympathetic.
You can't get
no sympathetic stress. It's like the near perfect ideal.
Yeah, and that's addressing all the issues. You know, we're using an electrical device to heat the body. First, let's get the right spectrum, the right technology. That's incandescent. But then we really need to incorporate EMF, electric field, and magnetic field mitigation principles so that we're not bringing in another nervous system stressor and putting us back into sympathetic dominance. So yeah, we've really created something unique here and addressing all these issues so that you can sit inside and have maximum healing going on. And we see that from the light, from the heat, and it's all magnified, doing all the light and heat and the structure and water all together without the EMF stress. And that's twofold. So with our products, we've ensured there's no electric field and magnetic field stress from our product, but the special kind of upgraded version that you have actually protects the user from external electromagnetic stress. So the external RF and the external dirty electricity that sneak inside and stress us out in all saunas and all areas on Earth, that doesn't exist in what I've created through a lot of testing, a lot of hard work here from the whole team actually, and that's really unique, is to do all of this in this space that's basically pre-electricity, pre-cell phone.
You're a real major innovator because no one's done this prior to you. So congratulations on that accomplishment and achievement. But I wondered if you could comment, because I'm sure you know the studies. I believe they're out of Finland, and these were done recently where they looked at people who saunaed regularly, like from once a week to every day, and they observed the mortality rates, and I believe from cancer and heart disease. And do you know which ones I'm referring to?
Oh yeah, there's so many of them. I mean,
why don't you summarize them for us? Because I'm sure you're more familiar with the details than I am.
Yeah, of course they do these studies in Finland usually because the entire population does sauna and has a sauna at home.
That's a clue.
Which hello, that's a big part of keeping them happy and healthy. But we see across the board in massive, decades-long, many person studies, very impressive studies. We see a reduction in all-cause mortality, reduction in risk of Alzheimer's and risk of stroke and risk of heart attack, increased longevity, reduction of like neuropathy and so many things. People are living longer and they're more healthy by using saunas. And interestingly, it's not just the duration of the sauna session, it's the frequency per week. So folks that are using the saunas more per week and longer sessions, and most of these studies are with wet saunas, with the Finnish style sauna, we see that much greater results. So The more is better in this case in terms of frequency. If we can use it 5 or 6 days a week, even better than 1 or 2 days a week. But even 2 days a week, or is a magnitude better than not using a sauna at all. And that's because we've just gotten so far away from this ancestral context that the Finnish population that understands so well, people who do sauna understand so well. This stuff, it hits all the avenues. It's healing everything in all ways, and it's not.
The magnitude of the reduction was the more frequent users was like greater than 50% reduction in heart disease. It was just crazy good. It's like almost as good as vitamin D.
Yeah, it's really stunning. How it's not well known, but in terms of one thing that you can do for 20 minutes a day with all this all this health gadgetry and all these things you could do, and I have this solution, I have that solution. One thing, to sit there and sweat passively under full spectrum light, protected from electromagnetic stress, it's probably the most impactful thing you could ever do as a kind of a healing activity you do. Yeah. For everything, for all issues.
I couldn't agree more. And without a doubt, it is my favorite biohacking device. And literally the thing I miss the most when I travel. I don't get too paranoid about it because I know I'm going to get away to go back home. So I would say 95% of the time I'm doing the near-infrared sauna every day.
As am I.
Yeah. But when you travel, your device could be packed, but it's not the easiest thing to do, and it's probably the best benefit challenge. I mean, you can pack it and travel with it, but it's just sort of
it's very portable. But yeah, the thing is, if you have a core discipline and you're using that using the incandescent sauna at home, when you're at home every day, you can do what you want. You can travel, you can goof off, you can cheat. Because you have that core discipline where you're restoring and repairing the DNA and doing all this stuff every day and getting the toxins out, getting all this junk that we're exposed to out. That's what it's all about. We can't get dogmatic here. We just need to take daily small steps toward better health. And that's it's a simple thing to do, actually.
Yeah. So now that you've heard Brian talk for over an hour, I'm sure you're just as impressed with I was when I first talked to him at Bulletproof and said, gosh, I just love dialoguing with someone who understands this at a very deep level and really studied it very carefully. And further, was put together really one of the most innovative devices out there with respect to sauna therapy. And I'm a firm believer, as are many other clinicians, that if you want to detox, you really need some type of sauna. And Brian's gone over very eloquently the difference between the far and the near infrared ones. And I couldn't endorse near infrared, even if you're making it yourself. If you have limited income, that's going to still give you some benefits. There's some downsides. Yes, you got to be really careful because those bulbs are hot. They can burn you big time. It's going to be electric fields, but you can still do it. And then Brian offers a whole variety of different strategies that you can implement, from a range of a few thousand to less than 10,000, but it still gets up there. So there's resources out there that you can avail yourself to that would really make a big difference. So any closing words, Brian?
Just that people always want to know, like, how is this going to make me feel better? How am I going to look and feel better from this? All I care about are my problems. I've talked to, and I'm sure you have as well in the course of your health career. I am no provider. I'm no healthcare provider, but I have talked to about 20 or 30,000 people on the phone, literally, in the course of dealing with incandescent sauna therapy and doing what I do. And what I found is that this really benefits everybody. Everybody has mitochondria. Everybody has terrible toxic stress. Everybody is getting hit with EMF stress every day. Everybody is designed to heal in the same way, no matter how we look. We're all different. At the cell level, we're all the same. It's the great equalizer. And this is I'm just very passionate in this being the most impactful thing that you could possibly do. If you can address some lifestyle choices and good diet choices, with a healing practice like this that returns you to what you did ancestrally, you can improve your lot in life. You can get out of where you are. You can, if you can just have a little discipline and just use the darn thing, you will see impact, positive impact. It's just guaranteed. I mean, stuff works for everybody.
Yeah, 2 points I neglected to mention is that you use 4 bulbs. and each bulb is 250 watts. So that's a kilowatt of power using. So it's going to definitely crank up your electric bill a little, but it's only for 20, 30 minutes. And the other point is that unlike many biohacking devices, which are customized or really you can only use yourself, your whole family can use it. Your friends can use it. Although before we leave, I've neglected to mention one of the issues, which is an issue, important caution that I think people need to know about, and I'm pretty sure you have a good answer, which is the fact that you are detoxing. You're volatilizing these petrochemicals, and in some cases heavy metals, into the environment, the space around there. So could you comment on how to maintenance of the sauna so that you're not acquiring toxins that the person before you liberated once where they were in the sauna?
Yeah, I mean, the primary toxic load that is excreted by your body in passive sauna therapy is through the sweat. And so it's not really like explosively ejecting, projecting out into the air. It's mostly you're sweating it. So the toxins in your sweat. So for your own sake.
I mean, objectively versus volatilizing through your skin versus sweating, is it like 99% of it's through the sweat?
Well, I don't know if I could quantify that here on the spot if you put me on the spot, but I know that, for example, there's like a 2016 or 15 bus study where they found out for the first time ever, blood, urine, stool study, that they discovered for the first time ever that you can't sweat out mercury. And that was something that was previously considered to be only excreted via the stool. So the more we look into sweating and passive sweating, we see that the body can almost get rid of everything through the sweat, and the primary excretion is through the sweat. Although definitely the some is through the organs elimination as well, the other organs. But the skin, the biggest, most powerful organ in your body, is the major detoxifier. So it's all coming through the sweat. And for your own sake, as well as the sake of anyone else who's using the same incandescent sauna at home, you want to collect the sweat. Is all. You want to use a vigorous amount of towel on the stool, a couple towels in the store on the floor. To collect all the sweat so it doesn't reach the product, and you just take the towels out, and you have a couple sets of towels, and you use those, and then and then you wash them, because the sauna sweat is very caustic. It's very toxin laden. It's actually caustic, and the same thing goes with your body. So typically after a sauna session, people get in the shower and they rinse off with a bristle brush and exfoliate all the skin. The toxins can cling to the dead skin cells. That Dr. Lawrence Wilson talks about this a little bit. So we want to get the dead skin cells off the body. Plus, it feels amazing on the skin, and it exfoliates. And you'll find you do this a few times. Do this after your sauna, a few incandescent sauna sessions, and your skin will just feel great. They'll really start to glow. And so that's all you need to do is do a rinse off with the scrubbing with a bristle brush after the session to get it off your skin, and then use towels in the product to keep the sweat, from going everywhere, basically. And otherwise, most folks using my saunas are definitely, the entire family is using it, and why not? Everybody needs it. Our children need it. Our grandparents need it. We all need it every day, really.
Yeah, so that's a good justification, for getting into one of these, is that your whole family is going to benefit from it. Get a large family, the cost goes down per person big time. And just one recommendation to even further improve the benefits from the sauna, mitochondrially and metabolically, is if you use cold water therapy afterwards. Because that difference, if you're going, because you can get pretty high, 130, 40, or 50. What's the temperature in your sauna?
Well, since we're using,
it's your body that heats up.
Since we're using radiant heat, the temperature in an incandescent sauna never gets above 120. It's 100, 120, maybe 125 max, but it doesn't get up to 150 like a far infrared sauna. Certainly like a wet sauna, it's much more tolerable, again, for that reason. And with our sauna design, for example, you can turn down some of the lamps, and you can leave the curtain open. So some people who are very weak and have heat sensitivity issues, dealing with MS and things like that, they start out with 2 lamps. They may only use it for 5 minutes and not initially provoke a profuse sweat as they slowly reactivate their body and ease into this concept. You got to get them out of their homeostasis they're stuck in. They're stuck in this toxic state. But it seems to work for everybody slowly but surely. And even folks who are really have great illness and are very weak, they can use this in a supervised fashion.
Yeah. but doing a cold shower after would be better for you if you can't tolerate it. Be able to build up to it. But that contrast is dramatically important to improving mitochondrial function. And one last point I neglected to mention too, we both did, is that the light exposure to the light source is imperative. So that unlike a far infrared sauna, where you just sit in the darn thing and your whole body's going to heat up. Not so with this. You've got to directionally change every few minutes or so. So you're going to be rotating a lot. There's a little movement in there to expose different parts of your body.
Yeah, that's the clothing, other than very fine white cotton, clothing blocks light. It blocks the near infrared light, so we want to be naked. And then also, we talked about photobiomodulation, PBM, in the beginning. Even the deepest penetrating near infrared in one NASA study was shown to penetrate like almost 9 inches, but on average, it's not penetrating that deep. It's probably 4 or 5 inches on average. So
still pretty deep. 4 or 5
it's still very deep. It's still very effective. But if we rotate in the sauna every 5 minutes or something, a quarter turn or so, that's the Dr. Lawrence Wilson recommended. That's the original protocol. We maximize our mitochondrial stimulation. We also get an interesting heating effect going on. You heat one side of the body, and so blood flows to the front, to the chest, and then we rotate a quarter turn, and now the blood is pooling from the front over to the side, and we get a better sloshing of the blood around in the torso and even more efficient heating through rotation and really effective hyperthermic therapy, but without doing too much on any one tissue point. So just another way that this incandescent sauna therapy is just a safer, more tolerable approach.
Yeah.
Detox.
So I can't thank you enough for putting this together. What an amazing resource, what an innovator, and really inspirational for what you're doing. I mean, if anyone watching this, and you're not going to, I mean, you could try to make a sauna like this, but the key example that Brian represents, in addition to providing such an excellent resource, is that he's an inspiration. So whatever your passion is, just go for it, and you can create the best product in the world or the best book in the world on your passion. So, I mean, it's just amazing what you can do if you're really inspired, and Brian's a good example of it. So thank you for what you put together and your inspiration as a human being.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mercola. I really appreciate it.
Okay.